what components are and what makes a component. We had already seen that, but we'll now go into details about that. And lastly, we'll talk about data binding. So who can tell us what is a component first before even we get into details about this? Somebody to try. Someone to try. Atuambie what is a component. So Vera says independent and reusable bits of code. Yep. So go try. Elvis.
Okay, a component is maybe let's say a subdivision of something.
Okay. That's good. Elvis. Okay. Component is a single building block of an application. So when it comes to reusability, we need components. So a single unit represents a part of that component. So when we say a component is a single unit block of an application, it means that a component represents a small part of this application. So they are used to represent small parts of this application. This small part can be maybe a footer, maybe header, maybe the body, just small parts, so that when we need to reuse this footer for 10 components, I'll just add the footer tag into each and every component. Not tag, but selector. We'll talk about what a selector is. So a component is a single unit of a user interface. An application is built by combining different components. For instance, if I want to build my page and I need a header, I need a body, and I need a footer, I can have 3 components and later combine all these 3 into my whole page that I'm supposed to come up with. So after executing the engineer commands, a new component is created, which will act as the root component. Yeah, so we saw this. There's already one component that is already created. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry about that. So after we execute engineer command, a new component is created which acts as the root component. So After we did that, a new component was created. This component that we are seeing here called app, that is the root component. And each component has the following. So we have talked about this, a TypeScript file, an HTML for the template that you're going to write, a CSS file for styling, a TypeScript file for defining behavior or logic, and a testing specification file for writing unit test about this component. So how do we create a component? It's easy with the CLI, but let's see. How many of us wants us to use the CLI? I'm one person who is always against CLI. Who wants to use the CLI? Because I'm against CLI, not for a reason. Because Vera, you want us to use the CLI? Kevin wants us to use the CLI. Okay, we'll do this. The first component that I'm creating, I'm not going to use the CLI. The second one I'm creating, I'm going to use the CLI. So we'll do both ways. Why I'm saying I'm against the CLI is that sometimes back I was training some guys, and then this guy went for an interview and he was told to create everything without the CLI, without using the CLI, by creating it manually. So that shows you understand something. So I discourage CLI, but I promote CLI when you are writing a bigger application after you have understood what is happening where and why. So now I'll create my first file here, folder, sorry. And this folder will be not but number, or even an header. So inside here, I'll create header dot component dot ts. Right. One thing you need to know about a component is a class. That is all you need to know. So we need to just write export class header, that way. So a component, you start by saying that this is a class. Now, what makes it a component and not just a normal class? If you can remember, we talked about decorators in TypeScript. So what makes something to be called a component is a decorator. And when we are talking about decorator, we talked about class decorator, method decorator, parameter decorator. What else? What other decorator did we talk about? We had like 5: access modifier decorators, parameter, property decorators, those 5. So in this case, we have a class decorator. Remember, decorator is just a function that runs behind the scenes. So component, I'm going to call it component, not call it, it's component. And one thing about this, you just need to import it from Angular Core, that way. So now it will straight give you an error, because one thing is a component must have an HTML page. That is one thing. So when I give it an HTML page, we'll keep quiet. So let me talk about this template. What is template and what is something else that we are going to see? So templates, this is where we write our HTML page. So right here we can say h1 and say dot and close this, that way. So we can write HTML code here. But think of, if the application is growing, we still have our logic here, we still have our constructor and stuff here, and all these kind of things. This is the logic and this is the HTML. If the component keeps growing, then we'll end up having a lot of HTML code and TS code, and these are mix up. So in this app, the app component, we saw that it adds an external HTML file here, which is an external one, instead of having the code here, where yes, having the code here. So if you're building a small component and it's just a few lines of code, you can use template. I'm using template here. Let me go back to header component. I'm using template. I'm not using template URL. But if you are building an application and you need to separate HTML code and TS code, I'll create another file, name it header.html, not .html, .component. So this .component is not a necessity, it's just a naming convention. I just have header.html. So I'll create an HTML code where we can write our HTML code. That way. This head. So we can write our HTML code, and remember we said our component must have an HTML. So instead of saying template, I'll say template URL. And since a component can have one HTML file, we'll just say just give it the name component.html, and it'll stop complaining. So that will mean that we are referencing to an external file, which is okay. Now, how do we show this? Because right now we have everything for a component. I'll come back. Okay, not everything. We still need a way of selecting this component or uniquely identifying this component. Yes, it has a unique name, but when it comes to selecting, it doesn't have a unique name. Think of it, if I want to have an H1, I need to use an H1 tag. So if I want to have a component, I need to use the name of the component. So the selector of the component, the tag that we can use to select it. So this is where we come up with selector. And with selector, you just give app. It's not a must app. You can just name it what you want. And I'll just name it app header, because most of the components are named app and so that way. And now we can use this as the tag that we are going to use to select our component. Okay, after you're done with this, we need to add a component to a module. If you can remember, I said a new module must belong to the app module, and a component must belong to one of these modules that we have. But right now we are only dealing with one module, the app module. And you can see under declaration, this is where you define the components that are under app. I'll define my component there and call it header. So also another thing is that it's imported at the top. So mine is header. I have not used, or you can use header component. Just rename it. Yeah, that will be okay. So with this, we need to go to the root component, sorry, and add this component here, because I said again, each and every component must be part of the routing component. So if now we start selecting, you can see app header is here. This is our selector that we have added. That's how you can select a component. So I hope this app is still running. Yeah, we get the message. So if I remove this tag and go back here, we can see the component. But if I add it, It means that now you can see the component here. No, that's selector, that's HTML. We can talk about styling. Right now we haven't added any style, and I'll add, you can use styles. Again, we have two options, just like HTML gave us two options. You can use styles, and styles will allow us, but you need to note something about this. This is taking in an array. Why is it taking an array? We can reference to more than one style, but we can only use one HTML. So just the same case in HTML, we can use a lot of styles. So we can use multiple styles here and you can list them here. But when it comes to HTML, it has to be one. So now I'll style my, is it H3 or H1? H1. And say color red. Okay, failed what? Oh yeah, this should be in quotes. So now we have given our H1 color red. So let's see if that takes effect. Yeah, the color is red right now. But assuming again you had to write 1,000 lines of CSS code or hundreds of lines of CSS code, having them here won't look nice. So now you can create another file and now name it header.component.css. That way, and this will write. We can write here our code. But what we need to do is instead now of using styles, which I'll just comment these, instead of using that, we can use styles URL and point it to our header.component.css. That way, and we can add other CSS files here. That's why it's taking. And you can see still the styling is there. Okay, so that's how you create a component manually. And I would like us to actually create a real header. So you can have a div dot not container and I can say inside the head tags can have 5. This one will say welcome. This one can say contact. This one can say feedback. This one can say not home but and this one can say even add an image there to act as our and src. May fetch an image. Can use this. That's long. Anyway, yeah, it's right there. We just need to do some styling. Okay, so let's go back to our nav. I just hope you can understand this styling. Almost styling. Okay, okay, there is space between. So I love padding. 5 pixel, 10 pixel. In items sent right there. That's okay. The next thing it will be .nav nav tags, and then I'll say text decoration none. And lastly, I want font size, maybe just to increase. Yeah. So yeah, that's okay. Let's set up right of around 20. Oh, that never helped anything. All right, let's just have it this way. I don't want to go deep into style. So I'll remove this hello world so that our div can be at the top there. Yeah, so now we have a kind of header or header session. That is one component that we are focusing on, the header part. Now we can focus on something else and on something else. Let me just change something here. Just a minute. This style looks bad. Yeah, I wanted it to look something like that. Okay. sorry for focusing on this. Let me finish what I'm doing. Now this styling is going to take me some time. Okay. Separate them. Okay, it's gonna taka kudefine hizi width. Okay, let's just have it this way. So we have our home page here, and it's part of a component. So anytime I want to reuse these, I just need to go and paste them, not paste, but just have this tag wherever I'm reusing it. So I can't use it as many times as I want. So what will happen here, you'll see phone app bus, which is okay. Now let's work on the body component, and I won't take much time actually. Component. So to work on the body component, before I go that questions. In Angular, don't we have JS? It's the way we have them in React. If you have 10 components, you need to have about 30 files, HTML, TS, CSS. No. You can still have one file, but the code will look bad. If you have one file, then this means instead of having template URL, you'll have template. Instead of having style URL, you'll have styles, and then you'll only have this TS file. So there's no JSX unless you go with that approach of having everything in this TS file, and it's possible if you want. It's still possible. But to now give you a disorganized code.
Question. So hapo kwa that app where you nini imported maybe app header, that one. Can you show me your code, please? Page where you, yeah, that place. What if you just this app header, this first tag, then you like that HTML where you say app header, you slash, then you close it. Yeah.
So I'm going to still it's going to work. Any other question? All right. Let's go on to, let me explain the selector before I forget about it. So selector, you can select these in so many ways. You can use this, the default one. It's using the tag syntax, I can go ahead and use these. And this is what we call attribute. So if you think of an attribute, think of this src. Src is an attribute for an image. So if I'm going to use then these, I'm going to use it differently. I want to use it this way. So I can have a div right there, and here I have up header that way, and I still have it. So now this is a way of using attributes instead of a tag selector, but different syntax for that case. This is the syntax for that. Something else is that we can use class names. So I can say dot app header. And now when I go here, I won't say that, I'll say class. Still works. So those are three ways, but I prefer let me just leave this here so that the flowing. Mostly use this tag one, and then looks better and easier and relatable to other languages. I'll root for this one. That way. So now we are done with the first part of this component about building a custom component or building the component ourselves from down or from scratch up. Now, the CLI allows us to create components easily, I'll say that, but just not to create them from scratch. Also, it's is way important because it ensures that you understand the basics of Angular. And with time, you'll note why I'm saying it shows that you understand the basics. So using the CLI, you can say ng. Ng is like saying I want to use the CLI, and then you can say generate the component, and then you can say body. Don't say body component, just say body. So now it will create for you these files, the four of them. In our case, we never had a test file. Right now is not necessary. And then something else that the CLI will do is if we go to our module, it will automatically add the component there for us. So we don't need to add it manually like we did. So it automatically adds the component. Now the component is ready. So let's write something on the body, some code on the body, HTML code. Also some dummy text is provided. Yeah. So I'm going to have just need an image here. So that will just have an image, and this will just have some text. Damn you. I can use this will be a long one. Anyway, I have that, and let's go to our app component. First thing first, let's delete this and just app header, and below that, not below that, yeah, below that, we need to say app body. So right now, when we go back to this app here, we have this and we have some dummy text here. So let's style this one, and we'll be done in a few for the styling. So app dot say this. Let's say right. Let's say width of this will be left a width of 50%. Yep, that's okay. Dot div left. I'm using custom styling because I won't allow any framework, CSS framework, until the end of the project, the end of the training. When you are doing your personal project, you can use frameworks that will focus on custom styling. Yep, think it's coming well. So I'll just say align. Okay, so the last, I'll just increase the font of this. Div right, paragraph. Okay, just need some padding for both. So here's our body. It's a different component. So now we can even go ahead and come up with a footer again. So that is the last component that I'm creating today. So this time you can say ng. Instead of saying generate, you can say g. Instead of saying component, you can say c. And then you will say footer. So it will still understand that G means generate, C means component, but don't use other letters because some other letters mean something else. S means services, those kind of things. So just stick to what we have now. Or let me have some footer here. And in my footer, I'll just have links. Going nowhere. So just have contract plus 254. 1, 2, 3. At g2 at gmail. Then maybe Let's style this. Don't know why I use an A. I can use something different like B. So footer. Dot footer X, and I'll just say justify content and space evenly, and the other thing will be what do I need? Align item center. I'll have a background color of in a colors trouble is color dot footer p, just have the color white. Actually, why did I change them to not be links? Let's just have them as paragraph. Now we just need to add them to the uproot component. So I'll just go here, up footer, add it. It's already added to my module because I created it using the CLI. So the CLI does some dirty work for, not dirty, but behind the scenes work. It's good work. So right now we can see this right here. And actually I have a footer. Let me go to my footer again, and I have hrefs with this. So and remove that too. So I'll give a padding all around of 10. I'm supposed to give to the main div. So there's our footer. We have some typos here. Let me check them. Kimathi. Is my P so close to? Hey, kwani hiyo P iko wapi? Anyway. That's all. So now we have 3 components, but they are joining hands together to give us our home page. So that's the idea of components. That's why we are saying they are small building blocks of an application. This means that with small parts, we can come up with a big application. And we have divided this application into 3 small units, and we can now combine them and reuse them elsewhere. So let's say, when I say a component must be added to the root component, I don't mean that it is a must for it to be here. It can be inside the body. So let's say the footer is not there. So if it's not there right now, we'll just have this. But later, you can still use it inside the body. So I can still go to the body here and add the footer there and still apply. So it doesn't mean that each and every component has to be in the app component. It means that it can be in the app component or the children of the app component or the children of the children of the children of the app component. So you can go any level that you want. The child of the child of the child, the app component can use this component and automatically display on the UI. Yep, any questions up to this point? about components. So Elvis.
So can you nest components within components, or everything has to be within the app folder? Like let's say the body, and then the body has some more components. So do you nest them within the body, or they just all have to be within the app?
You can nest component within components.
Okay, and then I can see a case of circular dependencies arising here. You have an issue with circular dependency, a component depending on another component, like they depend on each other. So like, how do you handle that? Or how does Angular handle that?
Circular dependencies comes with services. It's not with component. It will come with services. It will come with because I don't have a case of where app component is depending on body component and body component is depending on app component. So I don't have case where app component is added to body component and body component is added to app component. You can see it's like a parent child, parent child, parent child. So there's no, the parent will have the child component, but the child component won't have the parent component. So that is a case where maybe circular dependency comes in, but right now it's parent as child, child as child. That way, yeah, a child can still have a child. So I don't see a case of circular dependency with component, but I may see a case of that with services, or not even services. Even services won't cause that. It will be more of modules. If a module is importing another module and that other module is importing the other module. So if two modules are importing if module A is importing module B and module B is importing module A, that might cause circular dependencies with module.
Okay, and then maybe an observation I've made. So in React, you try to like you bundle your JavaScript and your HTML. That's why the JSX happens in JavaScript. But it seems in Angular you are trying to keep everything separate. Just like when you're using the HTML and CSS and JavaScript, like you have your templates separate and then your CSS separate and then your now the component linking them up together. So I don't know if I'm right to assume that's the case with Angular. Like that's general pattern.
Yeah. We have the HTML on its own, the CSS on its own, the test file on its own, and then the TS is linking them together. So we are linking them together right here. Let me show you where we have this component decorator. This component decorator is the one that is linking all these together so that they work as one.
So the pattern is to keep everything separate. The JavaScript, the TypeScript on its file, the HTML on its file, and the CSS on its file. Like that is the general pattern.
Yeah, that's the pattern we're going to use. Everything will be separate. The HTML, CSS, and TS, and tests.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Any other question before I move to data binding? All right. Let's continue then.
Just like an observation, these app components, then there's this, I mean, main TSI. So every component is being imported to app component, is it?
It's not a must. It doesn't have to be in the app component, but let me show you. But you can first finish the question.
So maybe maybe everything is imported to that app component, then taken to that main TS.
Yeah. The app component is what is loaded in a single page application right here. So the app root, but the structure will look like this. So these are app component, and right now our structure looks like this. So we have this app component here as the parent, and then the parent has three children right now. These three. Right now, this is the structure that we have. But in future, maybe the body can have products. So it means that if we are going to add a tag of the product component, we are going to add it to the body. So here our body will have this. That still means that this is in the app component because it belongs to a child of the app component. It might be a grandchild here, but still is inside the app component because the app component loads the body and the body loads this component, so they are still inside. We can even continue with these and all the way here. Sync. So this is added to product, not the body. So if this is also part of the product, it also means that it's part of the app component. So this structure can go all the way down. It doesn't have to be part of the app component. It can be part of the child of an app component or part of a child of an app component. I don't know if I've answered the question. From that, how can we add another page, e.g. about? So it depends on the level where you want to use about page. But if I could have an about page, I'll add it here. So it can be part of this because header can contain some links, and these links can be part of this, can be directing to this component. So, or else it can be anywhere, and we can add it through redirecting. So that's also another way of adding a component, redirecting. So we may have a link here inside header, which will redirect us to app or about component. So routine is also part of adding a component here inside because that link has to be part of something that is inside here. And then the header contact link, the contact link inside the header will also make sure that the component is also part of this. We'll talk about that when we get to routing though. So this maybe might be the structure that we have right now, or we may have, we keep improving it. Okay, Elvis.
On nesting the components. So when you have nested components, where do you import them? At the app, at the root, or at the component level where they are nested?
All components are imported at the module.
So at the main, at the app, like in our case, at the app module.
Yeah, or the module which that components belongs to. Right now, since we are just dealing with one module, we can say at the app module. But in future, if we are dealing with several modules, we can say in product modules, in out modules, in shopping audio modules, in shipment modules, all those kind of modules. But right now, app module.
Okay.
When it's in the app module, is available application-wide. Any other question before we go to binding? All right, let's go to binding. Binding is simple as communication. So not communication between components, it's communication between interface and logic. So when I say interface and logic, I mean HTML and TypeScript. So our component right now has TypeScript, and it has a TypeScript page, and it has HTML page. So sometimes you want to read this data from, like I'm saying, from the backend or make some API calls. You can't do that inside HTML. You can only do that inside TypeScript or JavaScript. We are not using JavaScript, so TypeScript. So our TypeScript here has the logic, or it has whatever we need to make an API call, and our interface is displaying this information. Simple as that. TypeScript has the logic of getting the data from an API maybe, or from wherever it's getting it from, maybe from the parent of this component, and interface just knows my work is just to display whatever the logic gives me, the TS gives me. So there are 4 ways of data binding. One is string interpolation. The other one is property binding. The other one is event binding. And the fourth one is two-way data binding. So all these, the difference is the direction. With string interpolation and property binding, the direction is from the component or from the TS file to the HTML file. So anything from TS this way to HTML is called string interpolation or property binding. The difference between these two is that let's first do string interpolation. So assuming where how can I use this? Yeah, let's have this. I'll copy this text. Assuming I want this text to be inserted here, but I have this text inside my TS. So let text equals that way. Okay, should not be let even. It's just text is equals to. This is a class. So I have this text here, but I want it to go to my HTML. So right now, our application has no text. So how can we take it to HTML? String interpolation. So string interpolation is a way to reference a string or any other data type that can be converted to a string easily, like a number or a boolean, and display it here. So string interpolation as a syntax is called the double curly braces, and then you reference there to the variable text. So with this, it will know where it's supposed to get this data from the TS, a variable called text, and you can see our data is back. So that is string interpolation. One thing you have to know that it has to hold either a string or any data type that can be converted easily to a string. Those can include numbers and booleans. So that's the first part of communication. And if you can see this communication, it's coming from component to HTML because the value is inside the component, it's not inside the HTML. HTML is just displayed, but it's referencing to a variable, inside component. Any question from that?
Kindly repeat.
Okay. We want our HTML page here, app.component.html or body.component or whichever HTML page you have, to communicate with our component. So think of I want to make API calls, or I want to write some asynchronous code that is supposed to get some data from my backend. I can't write that logic inside HTML. I have to write it inside TypeScript because TypeScript has the promises and everything. HTML does not have promises. So it means that if I'm going to write that logic inside the TS, that data is available in TS, but TS does not display that data. It needs to pass to HTML in order for HTML to display. So that communication is what we call data binding. Passing data from one place, either from component to HTML or HTML to component or both ways. So now we are talking of these two. These first two, string interpolation and property binding, they are one direction from component to HTML. So as you can see here, our data is inside the component. So our text is inside the component. And we need to pass it to the HTML so that the HTML can display it. So how we do that is string interpolation. This double curly braces the syntax of string interpolation. And what we have inside there is the variable that we want to use. So in this case, the variable name is text. Yep. What's up here?
Yes, thank you.
No microphone.
So by maybe using a that dollar sign, then the curly braces, will it work?
Because these two are different files. That dollar sign and curly braces works if I'm referencing to the same file, if I'm using it in one file. But these two, HTML is a different file, TS is a different file. So unless we use, instead of using template URLs, you use template here, and above in that I can say paragraph, but still no, I still have to use interpolation actually. So no, then whatever I thought won't work, because these, no, that dollar sign won't work in this case. We still have to use interpolation. Maybe, yeah, there's a case maybe dollar sign might work, but right now it won't work with this communication of the template and component. Elvis?
With string interpolation, when do those placeholders in the HTML, when do they get populated with data? At raw time, or you can fetch data at any time and then they will just receive the data? Like, can they detect changes along the life cycle of the application?
Yeah, they are going to detect changes.
So meaning if the page loads and you add a different data, and then along the way then it changes, they will change also.
Yeah, that will happen with lifecycle hooks. So there are lifecycle hooks which are listening to events or anything that might trigger a change of data. So if they happen, they reevaluate the component again, and in case there's a change, it's going to display.
Okay, so it re-renders them back.
Yeah, it re-renders in case there's a change with the lifecycle hooks.
Okay, awesome.
All right, that's the first part. Let's go to the second way. Still the same direction, component to HTML. So I'll still use this example, and right now I will have this SRC not here but inside the TS. So I'll have image right there. So these are our image URL right there. So since the direction is still component to template, but you may ask, why then don't we use string interpolation and still say this? Actually, this still works. So there's no issue about that. But this time, who can tell me the difference between attributes and properties? HTML attributes and HTML and JavaScript properties. And okay, what is SRC in HTML? What do we call them? SRC. What is href in a tag? What is text in input? What is type in input? What are they? These are, kuna mtu alisema HTML ni the favorite part, acha nimtafute. It was Samuel, Pierre, Brian. Kuku, you're going to give me the answer to this question. The attributes, amazing. So yeah, Kevin, I see Kevin and Samuel and Simon. HTML should be a favorite thing. Now, how is this thing read in JavaScript? So in JavaScript, tutatumia kitu kama document dot. For example, if I want to read the value of an input text, I will say document dot, okay, document dot get element by ID, then I get the element, let's say name, and then I say dot value. So this is JavaScript, and I'm using dot notation. So this means that I'm dealing with an object first. And objects contains properties, and properties is a collection of key value pairs. So the thing is, when we have it in HTML, it's an attribute. But the way JavaScript reads it as an object. And this object has property. So now we may have, let's say, an element like image. Oh, sorry, an element like a tag. It will have a, and then inside we have href colon the value that is the href value. And something like image, it will be the image object, and inside we have key values of first src and the value alt, that is alt, and the value. So now in JavaScript, they are treated as properties. In HTML, your screen is not shared. It must be on your side. There's nothing I'm displaying. I'm just explaining. So in HTML, they are known as attributes, but when you go to JavaScript, they are converted to properties. So src in HTML is an attribute. In JavaScript, we say is a property. So when you say document dot everything, you're going to read it as a property. So now that says src is a property, like we have just seen, unless someone has not understood that part. Okay, so that means src is a property now. So the name property binding comes in. So property binding can be used to bind HTML attributes. So now src is a great property in JavaScript or TypeScript, but an attribute in JavaScript. So now the syntax of property binding is square brackets. That way, and we point it to the name of that variable. So it still works. Any question about property binding? And I hope you have seen the difference between the two. Property binding and string interpolation. Most commonly used will be string interpolation. So let's do another example of property binding. I love a button here. So there is my button. It's called start here. And one of the properties that button have is disabled. And we can bind it to a Boolean value because disabled takes in a Boolean value. So right here, I can say Boolean, not Boolean, but allow or whatever. I just name it false. So this means disabled false. Disabled false means it will show or not show. Pierre, quick question. Nikiweka disabled false, does it mean the button will show or not show?
I'm not sure.
Not sure. Obed, will it show or not show?
I think it will show.
Be sure. It will show but not be functional. Okay, Christian says it will show. So if disabled is false, supposed to show, because disabled true means it won't show. So I can bind this disabled property to allow. So this means that this button will show. Now, if I change, okay, let's do even something even interesting. I'll go to my constructor. I'll create a constructor. And one thing with constructor, they are called first when the application loads. We'll see about that when we are talking a bit about also the lifecycle hooks. So I'll say after 3 seconds, make this button show. So I'll start with false. So this time it won't show, but I want it after 3 seconds to make the button show. So I'll say false. So you can see right now, let me refresh this. It starts, it doesn't show, and then after 3 seconds, it can show. So that's another example of using the disabled property and property binding. Think of all HTML attributes. You can use property binding for that. Yep, that's property binding now. Any question? So yeah, Elvis, go ahead.
Not the question, but so with property binding and string interpolation, so the main difference is how you do it in the HTML, and it just looks the same as the TS file.
Yeah, one main difference is that property binding is used with properties, things that we can say they are HTML attributes in this case. String interpolation you can use with anything. You can use with properties, again, you can use with normal text. So property needs HTML attributes. String and interpolation can work in both HTML attributes and other text format. So I can't bind with property binding when I'm saying that, for example, I can say this text here that we have here, I can say I'm binding it with property, because which property? I can say this. You can see it's just displaying that, because with property binding it expects an HTML attributes. I can bind it to inner text, or in HTML, but I can't bind it. I can display it here inside the paragraph as text content. I can bind it to text content, but I can't display it here inside. So with property binding, you have to make sure that you are dealing with HTML attributes or JavaScript elements properties. Okay. Something Any other question? All right, Kevin.
You can go back to your TF file.
Okay, TFs. All right. Yeah, right there.
There's a place you yes at the constructor. My screen had frozen. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
So with the constructor, I just set a timeout that will change the value from true to false. And then we are binding it. So hence this behavior, when I refresh this button is disabled, but after 3 seconds, it will enable itself.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Okay. I hope this is no more question and we can proceed now. So let's change the direction. Because if user is clicking at something, that something is on the UI. That something is on the HTML page. So now the communication direction changes from HTML to component. For instance, I'm filling in a form. So this form has inputs, and these inputs, the TS should take whatever I pass or the data of these inputs and send to the backend. So this direction is from HTML to TS, not from TS to HTML. Because why? HTML as the input, it is not in the TS. HTML as the input, HTML as the button is not in the TS. So let's add that. I'll just add something here in my body. I'll add an input. There. Oh, I have an input here and we have a button here for submit. So I'll just name it to submit. Okay. So now, okay. So if you are to communicate with HTML, we have to use event listeners or events. So now we are using events. So the event that I can use here is maybe on change or even input. Input is also an event, but this event does what? Calls something else. Or even before we go to this, actually, let me just comment this. Let's work with the submit button, and I'll just have a click event, a simple one that executes something. I'll say change text. So calling a method here, and this means that this method is supposed to, right now is causing some issues because this method is not in the TS. So I'll just go to the TS, add it. And I want us to change this text. So we can say this dot text is equals to hello the new text. So we expect when we click this button, the text in the body changes, and we can see the hello I'm the new text. So let me refresh this. So the button is first disabled for 3 seconds, and then we can click on submit, and nothing occurs right here. So what could be the issue? Let's go back here and see that I've not saved. So so right now I'll refresh this. After 3 seconds, I'm able to click this button. So I'll click it, and we'll see the new text. So that is an example of an example of a communication that comes from HTML to TS. Let's go to a different type of communication. This time it will be even better. So something else with events. Events can carry data. Events can carry data, and this data is about the event. So I'm still going to call this method text, change text, but okay. This one will be what? I'll just name this change, and here I'll pass in something which looks like this. That $ event is a keyword. It's a keyword. I have to repeat this. That is a keyword. So what will happen is I need to first build this method here. And this method is supposed to take in something of type E and is of type event. We all know that is of type event. So now this event can contain some data. So let me log this data so that you can see it. Log E. So am I going to? Okay, I need to save this. It's going in autosave. Now, when I open my console here and I type something, I'll go to the console and I'll just type something. So I've typed 4 letters and I have 4 inputs here. So these inputs contains the event information, and when we can go to target, we can also go to value. Yeah, where is value? Value. Right there. It will show us the value that is contained in this. So let's make this interesting by the type. When we type something here, we can submit it here, or we can see it here. Okay, so I'll just go here and say text is equals to whatever we type. So whatever we type, we are going to get it from e.target dot, and we don't see another dot. So here we are required to do something called typecasting. I have to tell it first, I'm dealing with an input element. That way. When we say it's an input element, it will understand that this has a value. Before that, it won't understand. So I'll say it should not be text, but this dot text is equals to whatever we type here. So let's see how that comes to play. I'll say hello there. You can see already whatever is happening. So this one is using event binding, and this one is using string interpolation. Is it okay? I think it's property binding, any of those two. So, and we also see how the event data, we can use it to replicate or to modify something. So that's event. Things you need to remember is that you can bind it to do something on the TS, or even you can use the event data that is part of an event. Questions before we go to the final method, final data binding technique. And also remember with event is template or HTML to component, HTML to TS, template to component. Mostly the TS side will be referred as the component. So if you hear me saying component, is the TS mostly, or everything but this template to TS.
Jonathan, you mentioned a keyword. So how does it come to play with the whole? There's somewhere you mentioned a keyword on the HTML file. Could you kindly open the HTML file?
Yeah, this is a keyword.
Oh, so event is the keyword here.
$sign event. Event is not a keyword. $sign event
Okay.
represents the data of this event, or the event data that we have seen being logged. It's a keyword. It's a reserved word, just like if, just like do, just like while. Now in Angular, the reserved word representing the event data.
Is it the only one or the others?
Yeah, we may see others too, but I think this will be one of the few that we will see, but we'll see others anyway. There are not many, just a few. Right, then let's add to the final way of data binding. This final one can be both directions. What do I mean by both direction? You can change value on the HTML or even on the TS. What do I mean by this? And we have only one way to do that. It works with inputs. So input, instead of using an event listener, I'm duplicating this so that I can show you. Instead of using these, you use, and okay, sorry, I forgot to mention that the syntax for event binding is the parenthesis. So now the syntax for two-way data binding is the parenthesis and the, okay, square bracket and parenthesis. So right here inside I write ng model is equals to text but some value. I'll just have text. Now this is causing problems, and it's causing problem because ng model is part of forms, and forms require you to add a module. So I'll go to my app module, sorry, and I'll go to this import part. So these imports that we have here are used for importing modules zenye tumecreate on our own and whatever Angular already has, or the modules that are part of Angular. So here I'll just import something called forms module, and it's going to be imported from Angular forms. That way you have it, forms module. Otherwise ng model won't work because ng model is part of forms module. That's why it's working with inputs. So let me go back here, and there is gone. So now, how can I prove that this is two-way data binding? Okay, I just need to save these. So right now, if you check at my input, it already has the text. So whatever text was on the TS side, we have it. And whatever text we change, we still have it. So we can either change this text from here. So you can see it's binding now from component to HTML. And also, if we type something, it means that now that is template to component. So if we type something, it's also going to change. So that is two-way data binding. The first way was component to HTML, and now we can still change the values from HTML to component. Two-way data binding. That's the only case that we have with ng model. we'll understand more about ng model when we are talking about forms. Yeah, and that's all about data binding. Let me check if I covered everything. Template variable, I'll talk about them tomorrow. Questions, overall questions. Yeah, go ahead.
So for when you are explaining the event binding, you did something where you are typing text in the input and then it was displaying immediately. So how does it differ from the, other than using the ng module, how does it differ with the current one, with the two-way binding you just demonstrated? Like,
Okay.
because the other one you could also type text and you could see it above.
Okay, good question. So they may look like they don't differ, but that's why I had these two inputs. So this input is using event binding and not something about this. So when I type something, it can change. The input is using event binding, but okay, let me type again. So right here we have that text. Let me delete and type from the other side. We have that text here. So event binding is one way, it's not two way. It's just template to component. This one is template to component and component to template. So wherever it changes, I'm okay with it. And that's why when we restart this one is already has the text. And when we change it, that's when this, you can see this one is also doesn't have that value, because changing this means that this template to is it template to? Yeah, it's template to component, which is okay. But what happens with the second one is first binding from component. Okay, it's binding both ways, not even first. We can still bind from component to HTML and HTML to component. That is what is happening. So if I type something here, it will replicate here. But if I type something on the other side, it won't replicate. It won't update on this side. That's the difference between these two.
So if I'm getting it right, so with two-way data binding, it will pre-populate both sides, but with event binding, it will only populate both sides after the event has been triggered.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you.
All right. Any other question? Can you show the keyword event with E? Let's try that. I don't think so. Keywords most likely won't be shortened. It's more of like, now tell me how we can shorten if without ternary operators. It's more of how can we shorten the while? How can we shorten while? So that instead of writing while, we write W. The same case. We can't shorten a keyword. I don't think so. So just to be $sign event everywhere we use it. Cool. I think we are done. I hope this was not complex, and we'll continue from there. Kesho. Yeah, Elvis, you have a question?
Yeah. So when will you use a two-way binding, two-way data binding? The other ones are clear, but use case for the two-way data binding?
It will come in handy with forms. That's why actually we're only using it with also forms, and we have to add the forms module because two-way data binding and ng model. Okay, ng model is from form module, so it will come in handy when we are using forms and binding the value of the form to the binding the value of the form to something else. So if we have to read the form, maybe we could say read this element first and then give me the value of this element. So instead of having to go those two ways, we just go one way by saying, okay, not one way, but by just saying that bind this to the other side. So it will come in handy when we are dealing with forms, template-driven forms especially. Even in the case that we're still using it with forms. Input is part of a form. We'll talk about template literals, variables, Kesho. I won't forget that. The last part of component data binding, this part, template variable. Right, NGL lunch break. You have lunch break till 2:15 now.